Good day and welcome to the Strong Ambition Podcast. I'm your host, Rhyland, and we're going to dive into my bodybuilding prep. And I'm not going to say last time because I'm certainly going to talk about it a lot more, but this one will be a really fun analysis for you to see my reflection of it. I've waited some time to have some good discussions with some other people around things, but then I wanted to sit back and kind of look at things, look at the information. And what we're going to talk about in this first one, in part one, there's going to be part one, part two. Part one is actually going to be more for you to learn from my experience. So I thought it'd be very helpful if you could learn what tactics I used that were actually quite healthy. In the first 3 months, it was a very healthy body composition change. I lost over 30 pounds. This is the best transformation I've ever done. I lost 30 pounds over the course of 3 months, and I do not feel that they were crazy tactics by any means. And so that's why I felt like if we could just do this first part one as phase 1 to 3, which are very healthy, measures and tactics. And then phase two, I'm going to talk about the bodybuilding specific stuff. We'll talk about posing. We will talk about reverse dieting and other stuff that are practical for you. But this for first one, and there's a lot of information to go through because it was a very long process. I'm even going to talk a little bit about my build phase, the initial build phase last year, and then the changes. But basically, I'm actually going to give you my personal assessment of what I did well, what I did well, and what adjustments I would possibly make in the future. Because there's a good chance I'll do another bodybuilding show. This one went well, and I did enjoy the process. But it would be helpful for you to learn about this. And I will always try to come back to this is what I want you to learn from it. This is what I learned from it. These are the things that I want you to take from it because this is what I took from it. And I'll also always put an asterisk of like, this is bodybuilding specific, and there might be differences along the way. So without further ado, let's dive into the episode here because this is a really cool one. I even made a PowerPoint presentation because I wanted this to be so much more tangible for you. So we can actually walk through this information, the jot notes and everything. Now, if you're just listening to it, just listen. I have good information on here. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to really experience it, you can go through the presentation, which is the notes I'm going to discuss anyways. But you can watch this on YouTube a little bit more detailed. So it is that much more helpful for you. So you can see all this stuff because I'm going into the food types that I chose. We talk about my workout splits and everything. So Ryland's bodybuilding prep for 2023. Let's dive into the build phase. And this is more of a pretty quick overview on it because the build phase had its own ebbs and flows and different calories and stuff like that. But I can tell you that it started around mid to late August last year because I was doing a bit of a powerlifting, and it was supposed to have some rehab on my knee, but I'd done so much powerlifting with it, with the program I sent up. I'm like, I should just be building because this much volume requires some calories. And then at that point, somewhere around August and September, I said, I'm going to do another bodybuilding show. Like I just felt like I was ready. I was in line with that value. And that's when I decided it. I did a mini cut in October because last harvest and I let the whole build phase get to my head a little bit too much. So I was too liberal with the diet. Did a mini cut in October to bring my body composition down to a more comfortable level. November, December, January, I did a build again. And then I was eating somewhere around 27 to 3,000 calories, just, calorie maintenance with calorie surplus, walking 10K steps a day, working out 5 to 6 days a week. During that build phase, it was a 5 to 6. So normally I really wanted to try to do the 6, but if I was so sore, and it was definitely sore at the end of that build phase, I would sometimes do what you call an asynchronous split. So I would try to fit it in, but if I need another day's rest, I would just do another day's rest. So I had 3 days in a row, a day off, 3 days in a row. And asynchronous just basically means I don't care if it's Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, I'm following my plan according to my work and rest days. And so, I might end up doing a push-pull on a Saturday one week, and the next week would be a Sunday. And that's what I'm saying. It kind of varied, but I had really good volume. I certainly felt bigger than I've ever been. And my body weight was actually not that ridiculous. I've weighed heavier. I've weighed more than 220 pounds. But didn't have that much mass and strength. So on the DEXA, so this was my weight average going into the cut. And I did my weight a week after of dieting. And then also the follow-up one after the competition was a week after, because I feel like it's a more realistic food volume on both those. So they measured me at 14% body fat. And I think it was at 214 pounds. Because I'd already come down in weight just from being in the new diet plan a bit. They have my lean mass around 178. Now DEXA is more accurate, just so you know. A DEXA scan is dual X-ray exormetron. I don't know. Look it up. It's a very low dose X-ray that basically it can tell you your bone mineral density. It's the most accurate form we have of body fat composition. Now, I also can do skin folds with minimal cost. DEXA is expensive. Luckily, the follow-ups are cheaper, but it is still expensive for what information you could just get and estimate, right? So my girlfriend Angelina will do skin folds, and she had me around 10.4% body fat. And with that assessment from the skin folds, my lean mass on there was around 192 pounds. So most lean mass I think I'd ever had. Then from there, I just want to quickly talk about looking at that build phase. What would I already improve, right? I'm going to tell you what I did, and I'm going to tell you my improvements. And for sure, longer duration. I still don't give a lot of enough time commitment to just building slow and steady. And slow and steady is a really important approach. I'm still a yo-yo dieter, like to some degree, where you get too complacent and then you want to cut and stuff like that. And you have to give yourself patience with your diet, and you can't be too liberal when you're in a build phase. You have to still have consistency on your meal plan. And so trying to give a longer duration to just committed to building. Now, the good thing is it had been like 4 years since I did my last show. So there was 4 years of some solid muscle put on. And even when we compared to the DEXA, we saw many pounds gained. And it's quite common when you do a build and cut, you don't gain that much muscle. It might be 4 or 5 pounds that people net at a time. But if you give yourself, solids 8 to 9 months out of the year and maybe 2 to 3 months out of the year to cut, more of that muscle actually gets maintained and sustained, because every time you cut, you're going to lose some muscle mass. So the other one is more time in a slight surplus. Very important that for me, it's a slight surplus, and I need to trust the body will use it. This is the problem with my model or my habit, and a lot of people, is if you just allow yourself those room for calories. I'm going to talk about this a lot because it's a bad habit that I think a lot of people have, but I definitely have still fallen into, is imagine that you have 2,400 calories for like 4 or 5 days in a row. Okay. So it's like a slight deficit for me. Then on the weekend, you have 4,000 calories for a couple of days in a row. Now, the thing is what's most likely going to happen is if my calorie maintenance is around 2,700 in that bulk phase, like I'm just describing there, it only needed another 300 to 400 calories. Then I gave it an excessive 800 to 1,000 calories, right? That's getting stored as body fat. So you're better off with like a 400 to 500 calories surplus over 7 days. That maybe 100 calories a day might be stored as body fat, but most of it goes to muscle building. So the more you spread your surplus, the better it is for muscle building, because you have other days that you're strength training and the body will build it more efficiently on those days. And so that's just something I have to really mindfully do. It's accountability on the weekend is a big thing. And then accountability on your meal plan. It's like, oh, I'm in a surplus anyways. Like, you can't use that. You have to treat it just like a meal plan that you would in a calorie deficit. And this is something that I needed to do then, and I still needed to work on now. Finding a more efficient model is also really something I'm excited to do. And I'm going to talk a lot about this because I would take an hour and a half in those workouts. And I was like, I kind of owned it. I'm like, hey, this is my trade. I'm a strength coach, bodybuilding. Like, this is something I don't mind. And it was fun to do because you would take your time and you enjoyed those workouts. But knowing that there's new techniques like myo reps, which is just very short rests, one big set, and I'll describe all of these, and myo reps, rest pause techniques. You can save so much time in the gym and possibly get very comparable and similar benefits. So a rest pause technique I'll explain first, and then myo reps is just that extended. So a rest pause technique is where you're trying to do whatever is a really hard set. Okay. Now remember, hard sets for hypertrophy, if you're not aware, could be anywhere from 5 reps to 30 reps. I think I've even seen 40 reps, but let's say it's 5 to 30, that as long as your last 5 reps are really hard to move the weight fast, you're hitting effective reps. Effective reps are the weight, like, it's just effective and it's kind of coined, and there's still some debate on whether or not that is a real thing. But I think it kind of makes sense because that's some people can just get to discomfort. I even would just do discomforting reps. Hey, the muscle's burning. It's like, no, get to a point where you feel like the weight is slowing down. Now we're hitting effective reps. So we hit effective reps on a set. Let's say I hit 10 reps I did it today, Bulgarian split squats, did 10 reps. And like the last two were like just slow and I grinded them. Now I rest 10 to 20 seconds. You got to catch your breath, which not all exercises are great for this, but let's say it's even like a bicep curl. You don't got to catch your breath too hard. You rest 10 to 20 seconds, squeeze out 3 to 4 more reps. And again, these reps should feel like they're hard to move fast. Now we know they're effective. And that is extending that set. And what it's actually possibly doing is it's replicating another set for hypertrophy. So if I did one set of 10, rested 2 to 3 minutes, and another set of 10, and both of them had the last 4 reps really hard to move fast, that would be 2 sets for hypertrophy. But now let's say what I just described, the rest pause. I did 10 reps, rest for 10 seconds. I did another 3 to 4 hard reps. It's kind of the same thing as those 2 sets, possibly. Like, I mean, this is where the research is kind of pointing. And so a rest pause technique is when you just rest pause and you extend one set. A myo rep is where you do it, and that's like all you do, and you do like a lot of them. And so from my understanding, and I'd have to really dive into the research as far as what their protocol was with a myo rep, but a myo rep is just extending that to be, doing 3 reps, rest pause, 3 reps, rest pause, 3 reps, rest pause, is comparable to doing 3 full sets for hypertrophy. Again, strength is different because strength and power, when you're looking at like the squat, bench, and dead, it's more about ideal form. And so if you form breaks down, which it tends to on hypertrophy reps because you can't move the weight fast, it may not get you the same gains. So I'm trying to experiment with a little bit of both right now, actually. But anyway, so using that, less deloads and less feeling needed. This is interesting research that I found recently, is that you can auto-regulate. And I'm just so used to going week 1, 2, 3, and then maybe week 4, you bring it down. Now I'm just asking myself, can I do another hard week? And just like this week, I arguably could have been like, yeah, this could be deload. I'm like, let's see if we can do another hard week. I'm basically going to go until I feel like I need recovery. Like I just know or my performance is declining. And so I track my reps, I track my weights, like, hey, I actually couldn't get that. And I did last week. We need a deload. So there's research showing that you can go as far as 7, 8 weeks, and maybe you don't need a deload. And it's better to just auto-regulate based on the individual and how the individual is feeling about their training at that time. Fewer days, more resting. So as much as I said I was doing that 6-day split, I kind of like my 5-day split right now, and I'm only doing strength training 4 days out of the week. So I'm doing conditioning on 1 day. So like when I do a real build phase, I might take the conditioning out. I'm doing it right now to assist in Angelina's training. But even then, I think you can do substantial building 4 days a week. And I actually want to practice that and prove it. And even if I did have a 5th day, I think it's enough. I think it's enough if you just prioritize your right lifts the right day. And then working on imbalances. So I didn't think about the imbalances until I was told them, and we started looking at my physique, and I started getting leaner. And it's like, oh yeah, actually my right side's smaller than my left on both my arm and my leg. And this actually came up in the DEXA scan. So I need to build that balance in the build phase. And then I also, want to build up my shoulders, build up my arms with my lower. The lower is substantially bigger. And so that's something I'm already starting to look at and to work on. So that should be done in the build phase. You shouldn't be like, you'll see in a split, I talk about hamstrings and back, hamstring and back. Well, now you're just hoping that you just lose less hamstrings and back by about month 2 or 3, because you cannot build up substantially in a cut. You're probably going to do it in your build phase. So now let's talk about the run through of the first 3 months. And this is like just going to look at a big picture approach of it for the most part. Because for the first 3 months, not much changed. We just had slight details and iterations to make it so that I could recover better, perform well. And I just learned a lot in that process. So the first thing to appreciate is strength training, as I mentioned, was 5 days a week. I really believe in that model. You can even do 4 days a week, but depending on your training, and as I was still training for prep, you need some good volume if you're bodybuilding, because you need to make the body really feel like it has to hold on to it, right? So 5 days a week, with 2 days rest, and I would usually do 2 to 3 days on and 1 day off, and I really like that split. So I don't like 5 days straight personally. And then I would usually do 2 to 3 hard sets. And, there's ramp ups, there's like a mild set and a slightly heavier. And I always like the 2 to 3 hard sets with 8 to 15 reps, depending on the exercise, what's more appropriate, sometimes even 6 to 15, with reps in reserve of 1 to 3. And I'm going to talk really about how that was a very important thing to regulate. Movement, we initially actually wanted, and I didn't realize I just forgot the number and I was doing more than that. I initially wanted 12K steps, so we ended up doing 14K steps a minimum, and I also had sport through hockey. So 14K steps a day, no cardio. And this is for the first 3 months, no cardio. I'll talk about more how like maybe I hopped on elliptical if I want to watch TV or just a variation of the exercise, but for the most part, it's good. Nutrition, 2,000 calories a day. It was a number I very much trusted, and it worked. 250 grams protein a day, carbs and fats would vary, but fats were usually 20%. The rest come from carbs. 1 treat meal a week at least, and within the calorie goal. Usually, again, sometimes there was earlier in the prep, there was some iterations where couldn't really track it going out and stuff like that, but still made it fit pretty well. And this resulted in me going from 216 pounds to 184 pounds in 3 months. Okay. What's really cool about that is like that's, over 30 pounds lost. And I didn't feel like it was substantially that hard. It was time commitment with the steps. There's still training to do. There's still meal prep to do. Like there's still time commitment. But for like the hard I knew bodybuilding hard to be, this was my best cut of my life. Like this was substantially easier. It fit into my life. I enjoyed my meals, and we'll look at some of the details, but you can still make it even easier. Or I want to say, yeah, easier in a sense of it wasn't super strenuous. Again, more of a time commitment and discipline of consistency. But the only tough days came when I trained really hard. And so that was something we'll talk about, how I needed to titrate, how intense I went. But for the most part, it's just a consistent calorie deficit and good strength training and good meal plan, right? So I hate to say it's nothing too crazy, right? Strength training, we'll talk about phase 1 here. We'll go through this. We're going to talk about the strength phase 1, 2, and 3. We'll talk about the movement phase 1, 2, and 3, and we'll talk about the nutrition 1, 2, and 3, and break it down. And I want you to understand that phase 1, 2, and 3 were the ones that an individual can actually learn from the most themselves. We talk about the last phase. That's bodybuilding specific. Okay. So strength training 5 days a week in phase 1, 2 to 3 working sets, ramp up. I think I might even been close to 4 at some point, but I learned later on to just titrate that down a little bit. 8 to 15 reps, depending on the exercise, finding the effective reps, as I mentioned. And this was super helpful, tracking the progress of your reps. So whatever I wrote down even my ramp up sets. I wrote down my last set max out, or like my really hard sets. And I call those the last set max out, or the hard working sets. So I know if I did dumbbell side raise at 25 pounds for 12 reps the next week, even if I do 13, like that is a form of progressive overload. So that stuff's super important, because there was at one point later on, I think it was in phase 3, where I literally, the workout was it was an identical workout from the Friday on the arms to the Monday. And I could not produce as much force on the Monday. And it was because I tracked, and that's how I knew it's like, this isn't a good split. I'm not getting enough recovery. And so tracking reps is super important, and load. So the split here, when we started out, because we wanted to focus on hamstrings and lats, we did hamstring, lats, and quads on day 1. Day 2 was chest, shoulders, and arms. We take a rest day. Lats and hamstrings on day 3. Day 5 was chest and shoulders. And day 6 was hamstring, lats, and quads again. And day 7, rest. I'll say all the exercises, if you want to see them, they are on I think both my YouTube. You can look at it, bodybuilding phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and on my Instagram. So you can find the actual specific exercises. But they end up being pretty similar. We just slightly shift the days later on. So some strength adjustments right off the bat, though. This was a big one, was Goodbye Barbell. It was a good chat with me and AJ where he's like, maybe you don't got to work into so much barbell work. Maybe you got nice quads because it's not your weakness. Work on your weakness and sustain your strength. And honestly, I was super grateful that he convinced me to do it, because just the systemic volume or systemic load on me, like the CNS, like that I just finished squats when he told me that. And the next day I was like hungover from squats. I'm like, okay, this is a good thing. I gotta let this go. And it was way simpler. It's like workouts were easier to just isolate muscle groups that way. And this is a bodybuilding specific thing. Let me also put that in there. I think if you like the barbell and you're in a fat loss phase and you're not trying to hit the stage or anything, do the barbell, because I missed going after strength PRs. Like I really love strength PRs, and it's also a great way to regulate yourself, to make sure that, hey, I'm still getting stronger. Maybe I'm not losing as much muscle mass. I'm still feeling like I'm sustaining my strength or improving it. And it's just like going into workout to have something to improve, right? And during a fat loss phase is super important. It makes you, hey, I'm curious, what can I do today? But if you're just, yeah, I'm just kind of going through the motions, the barbell is a great way to do it if you enjoy barbell lifting and you want to be really strong. And it's a very efficient way to do it. So it doesn't have to be barbell, but you should always have some strength goals to work towards in a fat loss phase. So the focus here in the strength adjustments here was to bring up the lats and hamstrings. So we gave more sets of those in the initial phase. We focused more single-sided exercises on my right side, and it was extra sets. So it was interesting where I do like a single arm curl, extension, side raise, all that stuff. And then I would do a whole nother set on my right side. And that was a great way to put more volume on it. And what was really cool is by the end of the whole cut, and we looked at the DEXA scan, I did this for about, I'd say 3 to 4 weeks on the single-sided attempt. I might have done a little bit longer, but according to the DEXA scan, like it definitely narrowed down the difference a lot. So I still see a difference in my left and right bicep, but I know that's something I can work on in the build phase. Eventually, this focus though was too much. By the end of this first phase, I had to rethink the split after 4 weeks, because the hamstrings and lats were just not recovered. So I would, I finish a hamstring lat day on the Friday, that's the end of my split, and then my recycles on the Sunday. So I start day one again. I'm like, I'm still sore. So I needed to rethink that to give it a little bit more. Some body types just get sore more often. And for myself, I do get sore pretty easily from workouts. And there might be reasons for that. The theory has something to do with more fast twitch muscle fiber types. So I've found that if just working muscles twice a week and just making sure, one, you push a little harder, but you give it more rest, is a really nice groove for me. So the split changed in phase 2 here, and we just simply did hamstring, lats, quads, very similar to the start of the week, chest, shoulders, arms, rest day. Then on day 4, we did a whole lower day, and we did hamstrings, glutes, and quads. Then on day 5, we did chest and back, which is like the chest and lats attack. And then day 6 was shoulders, arms. So really, we just allowed more of a focus on lower on the Wednesday. And then we put the lats over a day onto the day 5, and shoulders and arm on the Friday. And they got that rest day. And it ends up sequencing where my lower and my lats got enough of a rest, but they still got a lot of volume, total sets throughout the week. And that's kind of how I look at my volume. How many sets am I giving that body part per like for exercises and total sets throughout a week? And that's where you can actually assume whether or not you're growing or sustaining that muscle better. We got rid of that single-sided work in phase 2. I'm pretty sure it was phase 2. So this would have been, about 2.5 months out. And it was just easier to do more rest pause technique on it. So as I'd mentioned, rest pause, you do a hard set and then you do more. So I would even, let's say, finish two bicep curls. I'm not saying this is the exact exercise. I can't remember which ones it was, but it would even be like lat pull downs or something. And then my last set, okay, do another set of the right arm, do another set of the right leg on the last set. Because and then I'm accumulating more of those effective reps, and it was easier to save time. And my right shoulder throughout the prep gave me more issues. I've always had issues right and left shoulders, but in the last like 5 years or so, ever since I had to get surgery on it, my right's been more of an issue. And just this year during the prep, my right started giving me more of an issue, and we were trying to add volume to it. So it was really good to not put too much more volume, but just do the rest pause and to save time. It's a huge time saver. Phase three, same split, works well. Something I really valued is like, and I was learning a lot, listening to a lot of hypertrophy coaches over this time. And one guy just said, I mean, at the start, first 3 to 4 weeks is just neurological. So after that, you want the benefit, like keep doing the same thing. And so the more I did the same thing, the better it felt. And so and I could see strength gains, I could see weights going up. So I did a lot of the same split, a lot of the same exercises, maybe slight iterations of them. But I did have to give up the barbell bench. It was a one barbell movement. I did keep going because I felt a good stimulus to my chest, but then just eventually had workouts where I'm like, this is just not feeling good. So I went into more just fly work, isolated fly work. I did some push-ups to kind of really gas the muscles as well. Or I would use a incline bench machine, which actually surprisingly enough worked well. And I think it has something to do with the stability. The stability muscles don't have to work as much, and you can just stimulate the muscle itself. The other major thing was reps in reserve, and playing around with this was super hard, but I had to really pay attention to it. And this is something that everyone should really learn from doing a fat loss is you need to regulate it. You need to have some challenge. You need to push yourself. You need to be near failure. But if you go complete failure, I noticed that, phase two, so this is the second month of the cut, there was more fatigue and more appetite stimulated this way. So having reps in reserve of 1 to 3 and even closer to the 2 to 3, still heavy, but still stimulative, was really helpful. And just making sure they were effective reps, making sure it was tough, but I had reps in the tank was a great way to feel like, wow, that was a good workout. But the next day, I wasn't like crazy hungry and crazy tired. There were some days where I'm like, okay, now the calorie deficit's hitting me. This is it. This is going to suck. And it was just for one day. And I think it was mostly due to the training. It was due to, okay, that was a hard leg day, or that was 2 hard days in a row. So this was a very important thing to regulate, and something for everyone to pay attention to is when you're in a fat loss phase and you can just kind of feel like you can push it up week to week, but find a good, effective reps in reserve that you're still getting, sorry to use a lot of the same terms, effective reps where you're hitting hard, challenging sets, but you have a rep or two in the tank. You still need to see progression on that strength. You still need to be like, hey, it's heavier or it's more reps, or I'm just feeling like, it's either heavier or it's more reps or it's both each week until you feel like, okay, I need a deload week. And that's something I would really pay attention to is I did feel like I needed, even though I mentioned the build phase, I could go longer without deloads. I felt like the taper weeks made a big difference for me. So every 3 or 4 weeks, I would allow myself to taper down the intensity, keep the weight heavy, but a lot of reps in reserve, and then refresh that a lot. And that was a great way. And I do recommend people have kind of the ebbs and flows of their training when you're in a fat loss phase. Build phase, I think, is different. Build phase, like you push it, challenge it. Okay, I can't even output as much. Okay, well, you have all the metabolic advantage of having more calories and should be having more rest. So if you need it now, you definitely need it. But you need to feel that out and almost anticipate it more when you're in a fat loss phase, in my opinion, from this experience. So that's a strength. Now, movement phase, this was really simple. And I was so impressed with how effective it was. The goal was 12K steps a day, and I actually did 14K steps a day, which really, if you want to think about what the time commitment there is, it sounds like it could be challenging, but you can fit it in your life, is 10 minutes of walking is 1,000 steps. If it's like decent pace walking. Okay. So yeah, that's like, over 2 hours of walking a day. But I do live a sedentary job, so that's why it makes it even harder. So I'd have to go for a walk in the morning, I'll go for a walk at lunch, and I go for a walk in the evening. Now, the good thing is, I started off dog sitting and dog walking for like 4 different families for a month. So I had dogs, they needed to walk. I was very motivated despite it being freezing cold in Winnipeg at the time. Just bundled up and I did it. And then even after the dogs were done, I still bundled up and did it. It was just a part of my routines, putting up that morning, noon, and lunch. And I enjoy them. It was just like a break. I would just like get a lot of mental relaxation from it. Hockey was another great way to get a little bit more calorie spurts in there. I would try to equate it so it was around the same. So I basically assumed based on just the movement pattern, just the movement intensity, that it's somewhere near 3 to 4K steps a day. I gave it that much credit, and I think it's pretty realistic to say that's how many calories I would have burned from it. So on a day maybe I only had 10K steps or 11K steps. It would be on a day that I had hockey, so I knew I got an equatable amount of exercise. And then I kept that walking there in phase 2 and 3. It worked great. The average is probably even higher. I think it was closer to 15K steps. I would do cardio on a treadmill or an elliptical if it was like the weather was really bad, if it was like snowing out, or I just felt like watching TV because sometimes that's nice and I wanted to change it up. Part of the major reason though why we didn't do cardio and I was big on the steps is it's so much easier on your knee, and my knee is just good days and bad days. I remember one day where I had to do my steps and I'm like, oh my God. And this was like, I think 4 or 5 weeks out. And it was like pretty close to prep. I'm like, I hope this doesn't get worse because I was like limping and walking, trying to get my steps in. But it was just a bad day and it got better. So, and we ended up having to push cardio anyways. But this was a much more sustainable model because if I was going to have to do cardio for like 4 months, that was going to be challenging, right? So this was the coolest part, was like the walking was so easy in comparison to cardio, mentally and physically. Mentally, I'll just tell you, starting your day, go out for a walk, no music, no podcast, no anything, and just walk. And I especially found if I had like a quiet street, nothing's around, wow, that's calming. And if it's just you and your thoughts, I'm planning my day, I'm planning my social media, I'm planning something, or just working through a problem mentally or emotionally. I had a guy on my podcast and he called it wonder walks. And I love that. It's like, just allow yourself to wander your mind and think. It substantially changed just my own personal mood with my internal thoughts every single walk. And I'll talk about how I missed it when I ended up putting morning cardio in. I was missing my morning walks. So I cannot reiterate this enough. Morning walks, or walks once a day, but ideally you get spurts if you're a sedentary person 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night, will change your physical health and your mental health. Best part of, I'd say, one of the healthiest practices that I've implemented. Just to continue with the whole phase here. So end of 2 to 3, around phase 3. So mid-March, hockey actually ended. So I didn't have that. So I just had to rely more on my steps. And then from there, we go into nutrition phase. Nutrition phase 1 to 3, and we'll discuss this. This is going to be some of the interesting stuff for you. The interesting part here is it's fucking simple because I just dove into 2,000 calories a day or just under. I say plus or minus 50. So it was over 50. I wasn't worried. Ideally, it was just slightly under. And protein was 240 to 260 grams a day, ideally around 255 is normal what I saw. Macro ratio was 45% to 55% protein. I always wanted to see fats around 20%. It's the number that me and AJ kind of says like a good ratio. We always kind of want to have a minimum effective dose of fats for hormonal function. And carbs would be the rest, around 25 to 30%. Now, this macro ratio, I'll start with the calories. They're just right. Like where I was not too fatigued, I wasn't too hungry. End of the day, I would finish my food and be like, I could eat, but I'm not starving. And that's a perfect calorie deficit as far as I'm concerned. The really cool thing is I was at 216 pounds and, I'm doing 14K steps a day. I think my metabolic rate was quite high. Like I was probably burning 1,000 calories a day almost, give or take. I don't know for sure, but like the calorie deficit, like the rate that I lost my fat loss at the start was terrific. And the other thing I want to mention is like the protein, like that ratio, that I didn't do last time. We just did 200 grams. That was substantially more satisfying. So the whole plan here is great. Now say like, this is where you can learn from, but you still have to make it for yourself. And we'll talk about more the lessons I want you to learn from my evolution on this. And we'll talk about kind of how the phases change, but the calories really didn't change much. They didn't change actually. So phase 1, the meals were 3 meals a day. I was into windowed eating at the time, and I'm still a fan of windowed eating, but for the most part, this just worked with how my routine was. I would work hard in the morning, either my morning walks, but I would just do my my business work in the morning. And then after my workout, and this isn't great for everyone, people would disagree with it, but I liked it. I would go get my workout in. I still felt like I performed well. Then I would have my first meal. First meal, and again, you can look at my Instagram. This stuff's all on there. Eggs, egg whites, oats, salsa, hummus. I love this meal. It's delicious. The next meal, I would usually have a lean meat, pork tenderloin or chicken. Huge fan of pork tenderloin. It's much cheaper than chicken. And then it was rice and fruit. This was just how I set it up in the first phase. I was actually experimenting with some things, trying to have more fruit and staying away from some veggies, just experimenting some stuff, but of protein and fruit. So I was trying to have a lot more fruit instead of veggies. The windowed eating I enjoyed. It was efficient. I didn't have to cook as many meals. It was nice. It was comfortable. Just so anyone gets clarity on this, you may or may not have heard me talk about windowed eating before. I am a huge fan of it for meal efficiency and appetite satiety. Like that's it. There is no magic autophagy. There's no magic around like being better for your gut. You eat good food, it's going to be good for your gut health. Gut health is just eat healthy, right? And we see a lot of people say, "Oh, this is great for you for this, or this." It's like if it makes you eat good whole food consistently at the right amount, then it's probably good, right? I'm still not a fan of one meal a day. I'm not a fan of missing entire days and fasting. I think both of those come with disordered eating behaviors. And we want to look at whatever eating routine you have, you're trying to practice something you're going to sustain, right? Even during this bodybuilding prep, I'm doing sustainable models of eating. And so just wanted to put that asterisk out there. I like windowed eating, especially if you have more of an appetite. You prefer not to think about food. Some people don't even have an appetite in the morning. Then let's get you windowed eating. But I still distributed my calories evenly. And meal one and meal two were actually bigger than meal three, the last one, end of the day. So that split worked for me in the first phase. Second phase, not much change there. It was still going good. And it was funny too, because we even had a discussion, me and AJ. I'm like, can you talk me out of like windowed eating? Like, do I need to worry about this? But the thing is most days, not all days, but most days, I would try to at least have a 4 hour separation between meals, which is ideal for protein rebuilding. And then, I was having more than my body weight in protein. I was hitting the two major things, the right quantity and spacing. So it wasn't really that bad. And I'll talk about later about how I shifted it. The interesting thing, and AJ even says, like, I don't really think you have to because you're hitting the two major things there. And that's how I feel about it for most people is if someone was trying to train for Mr. Olympia or, like I'm going to be a really competitive bodybuilder, let's use everything we can. I want you eating 4 to 5 meals a day, 4 or 5 hours apart, perfect amount, all that stuff. I get it. But for me, I'm still using some lifestyle applications. And if someone's like, am I going to build muscle consistently with 3 meals? Yeah, I think it'll be fine. I think it'll be all right. And so it was fun. And then in phase two, the only change that I really made here was same meals, eggs, egg whites, oats, salsa, hummus. And then the next meal, pork tenderloin, and then veggies went in there. And that was a big play. I brought the veggies back in, and I'll talk about that later on, how my California mix, and just like I ate more of that than I even had rice. I'd even started to lower the rice with some hummus, and that was a huge game changer. I'll talk about how that helped me a lot. And protein powder and fruit, and I'm still a big fan of, plan on a dessert style like shake in the evening, but I don't actually make it as a shake. I make it as a bowl of protein powder and fruit, and I mix it up, and so you can have a high quantity of fruit. And when you masticate, when you physically eat your fruit with your protein powder, there's more of a food experience. Like if I drink it, that thing's gone in like 5 minutes, and I really didn't get as much of an experience. But if I masticate and I actually have that, it feels like a dessert. It feels like more of a food experience, and those things are really important when you're so regimented, everything's so controlled. We got to look at these little things that we can enjoy, and I did enjoy this meal plan so much. So adjustments here that I would say in phase three, or that I did do in phase three. So I made the food more uniform. As much as I said that was my meal plan, there were iterations. I might change the meal type. I think at one point I even did like drumsticks, and I didn't like it as much because they're harder to track. But it was easier when I just cooked it the same way because at this point, phase three, I'm 2 months out. I got to make sure everything's on the right path. And there was even this one day where I made a certain type of chicken where it had, way too much garlic salt on it, and it jacked up my weight like 5 pounds. Now I knew that was water weight from salt, but I'm like, I just don't want that, lack of tracking skill, right? So I actually started tracking my salt. Great tip from Brett Raffel. Like he said, you measure out your teaspoon or half a teaspoon of how much salt you want to have in a day, and you know how many grams that is. Just that's your salt for a day. Just do that consistently. And I'm someone who just kind of salts to taste, but I think that was really helpful for me who wants to measure consistently. And it's a way easier way. And it did make it like, oh, that's how much salt I get today. So I knew I wasn't over salting my food. The other adjustments was like I was making sure by phase three, almost everything was pre-cooked as often as I could. They just run smoother. Like pull out my breakfast when I'm hungry, it's ready to go. Everything was pre-cut. Like it was so much better for having that routine. Pre-cut all my meats, and it was good to go. My morning meal, I actually added in phase three. Now this was a bit of an interesting shift. I just realized that there was morning workouts. If you work out, I think you should have a meal within an hour or two. It's not as it is still an anabolic window. It's just probably not good to work out at like 7 or 8 in the morning and then to wait until noon when your body has just been broken down. Like it's not like it's the most important. Like we say this, you have to have a protein shake in the showers or something, but that's still an anabolic meal. It's still a very important meal to eat it after. So I was having morning routines where I just like get all your physical work done because I was getting more tired at the end of this. Near the end of the third month, you are going to feel a little bit more tired. But I had that good routine in the morning. I started eating around 9 or 10. And so then I could still space out my meals. And I also found that basically all I did was I doubled up the exact same meal. Meal two, my second meal was just I'd have it twice, but I distributed my protein, I distributed my calories, so still at 2,000 calories. So I'd have that pork tenderloin, veggies, and there was actually no rice at this point. Hummus, hot sauce, and stevia, which by the way, amazing hot sauce, hummus, and stevia. And I would just have that twice, and it doesn't bother me. Like I think when you just have a lot of the same foods, make sure you just really like that food and just keep eating it, and it works very well. So what I actually liked though was having that afternoon meal, and even if it was closer and it wasn't necessarily that 4 hour window, it just fit within my routine. And what was important for me, and I still do, is that me and Angelina typically have a afternoon call where she gets off work, and that could be anywhere from 4 o'clock all the way to 6 o'clock. And so when she calls, I'm going to eat. And so that's just when I situated it. And that might have been 2 to 3 hours prior, but I'm like, I still get my protein in. And I actually found like I was more full after that second meal. So I think the lesson here, I hope you to learn as an individual, doesn't have to be perfect. Like there are numbers that like I do think you should have your body weight or more in protein, and it should be distributed over 4 to 5 hours. But if it's 3 hours, if it's 2 hours, and you're hitting every other, goal within your right amount of calories, you're feeling more satiated, digest well, it doesn't bother you, it fits with your lifestyle, like that last part fits with your lifestyle. I think that works, So like if it can get you to point A to point B, I'm a big fan of it. Like I even know someone, because I was doing this before in my own just routine, where he does something very similar to what I used to do, which was the first meal was somewhere near 80% of it, not 80, sorry, around 60 to 50% of his calories. And I used to do that too. And it worked. Like it actually worked. It was like I would have like half my protein there. I would have a lot of like it was 50% protein, but it was like 1,000 calories in one meal, and then 400, and then it was 500. And it still kind of works. Like it's not optimal, but it works. And so what works for you long term is super important. I just want to point that out here in this adjustment phase. So yeah, and then I had my protein powder and fruit, and then again, felt better for energy. It was just a really interesting day where I was so used to the 3 meals. I was waiting for Angelina. I'm like, why don't I just break up the meals? And so I did a little snack here, waited 2 to 3 hours, had another meal there. I'm like, that actually works really good. I'm going to keep doing that. So I am kind of doing that split right now. We'll talk about that later. Now, it's also important, like I mentioned, it's not ideal for muscle building, and that's okay. Make things fit your lifestyle, right? I think at least if we can take a 2 to 3 hour break between meals, you're doing something well. But what's really important is that you make it your total protein intake, distribute it the best you can, your total calorie intake. And as long as you have around 20% fats, because you need that for hormonal function, you're doing great. Like, just make sure you get micronutrients along the way. So I got some really good ideas here, or these are very important, helpful, I think, nutrition habits that I think you can learn from. Okay. So I really encourage a lot of people to try some of these. Number one that I think has the most resistance, other than I probably should have written tracking. Okay. So I'll put number one in here that's not written down: tracking. You want success, track your way to success. How do you know it's successful? You tracked it, you have proof. You want to get stronger, track it, you have proof. You want to get wealthier, track that budget, you know you have more money. And I mean, we can go on both of those analogies and just ask ourselves, okay, I want to get stronger. Okay, great. What could you do last week? I don't really remember. Okay, so how do you know you're getting stronger? So if you don't write a number down to actually quantify what that means, it's going to be hard to do better, right? And my favorite analogy is with the money budget, right? It's like, well, I want to make more money, or I want to be wealthier, I want to be richer. So you need to save more than you spend, right? And at the end of the day, the only way to know that you have that result is if you count your money. So when we look at our food and you say, yeah, I just kind of feel it out, it's like, well, then we just are going to kind of feel it out whether or not you're good or bad. And you're going to kind of feel it out. And the worst thing that can happen on both of those, you could train too hard with strength and you could hurt yourself, and then you need to stop. You could literally be budgeting maybe too inappropriately and not giving yourself money for the right things, or maybe you're wasting money in the wrong things and you didn't realize how easy it could be to sustain your lifestyle, still enjoy the things you're doing, and get wealthier. And that is a perfect analogy with your food. You could realize that, and I see this time and time again when people are like, yeah, I'm just going to eat less. Maybe you're eating too little. You're not eating enough protein. You're not eating enough micronutrients. And then it just takes 3 to 4 weeks, and then your body's actually depleted, and you get sick, and then you want to fall off. Track your way to success. Okay. So that's the first one. I didn't write it down, but I think if you want to make a big change, make that change first. The other one that I think a lot of people have resistance to is pre-cooking meals. Good old meal prep for days. It just helps. It's just so much simpler. People have resistance to reheating food or eating the same thing twice. Minimum of twice, I think, is a really good routine for anyone who has a hard time being consistent, who really wants to get a result from weight loss, and notices that they get emotional with food when things aren't prepped. That last part is your biggest battle. It's like, oh, nothing's ready. And you tend to go to the easiest food, or you tend to order in. This is just something you can control ahead of time. If you have time to cook food at all, cook it for as many days as you can within reason, right? I'm not saying that you need to cook Sundays for next Saturdays. I can. Not everyone likes that. So maybe you cook Sundays into Wednesday, and then you cook Thursday into the Saturday, or even supper for lunch is a minimum, right? Cook your supper, have it for lunch. And for me, I would even, it just like, I had no problem with it. It just made my life easier because I enjoy my meals so much as well. That's another major thing, is make sure you enjoy your meals. But I would pre-chop my proteins. So I'd have all my proteins as often as I could. Anytime I'd have like 10, 20 minutes, I'm just chopping up all my pork, toss it in there. Because then later on, when I go to actually want to serve myself, I just get my bowl, weigh it out. It's good. Now, some of the traditional models, people put it all in those containers. I didn't do that. I mean, I luckily don't have to go physically to a place too often in the week and bring my food. But I liked my prep as just being chopped and cooked, and then I have no problem putting that into a container later. I pre-made my eggs and oats for days. That, initially, again, that's a lot of upfront work, but later on, to prepare to serve your meal is like 5 to 6 minutes. Heat up this, put this in there, we're good to go. And that is so nice when you're trying to work with eating consistently, and food can be emotional, right? So we get rid of that emotion and the chance of being off. Bowls of food was really big. So it felt easy to prep, felt easy to eat. So I just toss them in, and I'm a big fan of bowl eating. I just, I eat with, I'll talk about the smaller spoon, but I just like the food quantity looks bigger to me. I like the mixture of sauces and flavors in there. Angelina, my girlfriend, she likes them separate. There's certain foods I do like to separate, but I'm a big fan of bowls. Large quantity of cooked veggies, less rice or no rice was great for me. I think it's definitely more expensive because rice is so cheap as a carb, but even then you can get like a cheap California mix. It's going to have high fiber, a little bit of protein, and just put this in proportion. And I highly recommend you just look at the serving size one day, and you can see some of my foods on my Instagram. 350 grams of veggies is 82 calories. 65 grams of rice is 85 calories. Like the size differential there is substantial. I would finish that bowl of California mix routinely on my diet and be like, I can't believe this is a bodybuilding diet. Like I'm full. And so it was way more filling. Adding the more fibrous veggies was a great game changer. And then I'd mentioned small spoons. I talk about this on my Instagram too. Like, take time to eat mindfully. Like when you're in a calorie deficit for a while, like let's like eat mindful. Like take your time with it and be like, I really like this meal. And just remember to enjoy your meal, enjoy that, so you don't feel like you're just having to eat it. And I think I should have made a note in here, and I don't think I did. Enjoy your meals. Like set up your meals where like my eggs and oats I've been eating for over 10 years is a version of it that of just slight iterations. I think in this prep, I actually added the hot sauce and stevia within the salsa. Slight iterations is all it needs. Now I love it even more. And so make sure you love your breakfast. Make sure you love your supper. Make sure you love your whatever your other meal is. If you don't, start to look at recipes, simple, repeatable, something that you would enjoy, something that like I could eat this for a long period of time. And if you feel like you get sick of it, that's why I believe people should have 2 iterations of each meal. If you have even 3 meals a day, 2 different styles of your breakfast, 2 different styles of your lunch, 2 different styles of your supper, maybe a 4 of that. That would just add maybe a protein shake where you have 2 different styles of your protein shake or protein dessert. That's 8 iterations. So you do 1 week of this meal, next week of that, and you got a ton of variety. And again, you're always going to evolve this, but highly recommend that you make sure you enjoy your diet. All right. Another helpful tip here is just I really recommend, because this was a big find for me, was hot sauce, hummus, salsa, and stevia. So hummus and salsa are very low calorie, but they really change the texture and the flavor of everything. I find like hummus, like if I just make salad, for example, and I put something on there for dressing, the hummus will almost double the texture with just a tablespoon of hummus. I feel like it feels like there's more oil on there, and it's not that much more for calories. Like there's like 2 tablespoons is 70 calories. I still track it, but it's way more manageable and it adds that texture. I put it in salsa and it adds a texture to salsa. Salsa is not very dense at all. And it has some sugar, but it's not bad sugar for the most part, because you are looking at, I remember somebody had said, yeah, it's loaded with sugar. We use that term loaded a little bit too much. There might be some versions that put a little bit of sugar to sweeten it, but I make sure that I have one that is just the carbs coming from the veggies, and putting some stevia to sweeten it up, plus hot sauce. To me, I love hot and sweet. Favorite additives. I really recommend you mess around with those. Diet Spray 7-Up. You know, the controversy people are about, diet drinks, all this stuff. They're safe. Like there's a very, very high tolerable limit of like 12 pops, diet pops a day that is still safe. And again, there's not even proof that it creates cancer in humans. There's no proof of it. And so I would not worry about that. I think within reason still, like I have talked to people who they can have like 9 to 10 a day. And it's like, I think we should be closer to 2 or 3 a day. And that's where I was. Like I would either top off a meal to make me feel more satisfied, have it maybe between a meal if I'm trying to get between meals. It should not be more than water, right? We should be only having it in as the in between. But I'm a big fan of diet drinks. The only thing that's a downside of like some of the darker ones, like Diet Pepsi, Diet Coke, is that they might have caffeine. So just be aware of whether or not that affects your sleep. If I'm out with people, because I usually don't have Diet Sprite, so I like Diet Sprite in the evening, I might have a Diet Coke or something like that. But be paying attention. It's like if that affects your sleep. So I might have 1, 2, you're going to get closer, because it's around 40 grams of caffeine per pop. So you just want to be cautious on the caffeine. Essential amino acids. This has always been a big thing for me for satiety, not muscle building. So there's still some people who believe, and I think there's reasons they could decrease atrophy when you go into a workout, and it likely could help you with a little bit of recovery, drinking it during your workouts to maybe decrease muscle soreness. But to me, it just has its weight in gold where if I'm between meals or like as I was doing window eating, so a couple coffees in the morning, then I go work out, there might be some hunger there, but amino acids, I wasn't hungry. I put some salt in them as well. So usually I just make sure I choose an amino acid brand that has electrolytes in it. Typically they won't come with salt, but they will come with potassium and magnesium. And so I would want to buy a brand of an amino acids, or whether it's branched chain or essential. Aminos, I would rather the essential because you get more out of it, but just make sure it has some electrolytes in it, because if it just gives you amino acids, I don't think you get much from it. But if you're getting the electrolytes, then you get the aminos. It's just a better purchase overall. But highly recommend that. If you have a hard time with appetite, I would have that in the morning if I felt like I needed it during a workout, but at night for sure. I would even make a mix of diet Sprite and essential amino acids. I still do it to this day, and it tastes quite good. Treat meals are super helpful. I just think that treat meals, still practicing to eat mindfully, understanding how to make your fit your macros within reason. It's not like if it fits your macros every day. We're not having donut every morning just because we can. This would be, I might have a protein shake with some sort of a treat. And to me, my treat meals typically come as more sweet. I have clients who like more savory. It depends on, and some weeks I would even have it as a steak, which again, that doesn't even mean it's a treat meal. Like, I mean, it just is not my normal routine. But I would typically have a treat meal. And what makes it really good is I would practice doing this mindfully. I would practice to make sure my calories fit on the day. And I would also be aware that if I'm having something that's heavily processed, it's probably going to make me a little hungry still after, right? So you have to get used to that experience. But it also just built up a relationship with these foods. So I thought that was super helpful because I had a good accountability source for the 4 months. So if I did this the whole way, I had better experience with that food. I don't miss it because I had it last week. I had nightmares of, like, in my last prep where I was like, oh my God, did I eat bread? It was just a dream where I ate bread. And I was like, no, I didn't fuck up. And I thought just eating bread would have ruined all my results. But it's not the case. And so I was able to have more consistent treat meals than I'd ever had, with the best success I'd ever had by planning it and planning appropriately. I actually have full training on this. I didn't want to go into details on this because I got a lot of info already, but I have a full how to make your treat meals fit and exactly how I did it. So if you want this, you just message me on Instagram. Hey, can you send me your treat meal training? I can send it right over. All my clients use this method, and it's a really simple idea, but it shows you really good structure on how to structure your diet around it. And then you can even have, like, if you're not necessarily trying to have a full deficit, I was trying to say a deficit. If you have maintenance calories, you can have a full 1,000-calorie meal and you can still go towards your goals. So highly recommend you reach out for that. And the other major thing is, like, most treat meals were shared. I can't reiterate this enough. If you can find someone, a friend, a significant other is great, a family member that you want to share a treat with, it makes it a real special shared occasion. Me and Angelina still do it to this day. And I know personally, as a binge eaters like to eat alone, and then you eat a lot. And so to make it so that you wouldn't feel like you're going to splurge and it's all about the food, like, we made it so the food was an experience that we were sharing. And it was amazing. It was like, okay, what do you think of this cookie or this pastry? And that's usually what we do. What would you rate it? What do you like about it compared to the other one? And that was just so fun and exciting. We eat it more mindfully. I want to chew it slower. I want to get everything out of it. And it made me really appreciate that experience. So I can't reiterate that enough. Share your treat meals as often as you can. Find a friend or significant other that you'd want to do it with. But even if you don't, at very least eat mindfully and do that. At very least eat mindfully. No distractions, no TV. It's you and that food. And if you're not willing to sit down for 10 minutes and experience that food might not be that good. Maybe it's a mindless food, so that's not that good at calories, right? And this is something that really appealed to me as I realized I like M&Ms, like peanut M&Ms. But to sit down and to just eat peanut M&Ms for 10 minutes, I get bored of that. That's not that good of a food experience. So it's a mindless food, so it actually isn't as worth my calories as I thought it was. It's actually just a really good, simple, mindless food if I want to binge. But if I want to really enjoy it, at very least, I'm going to have the variety M&Ms because there's some that come in a variety pack. but I'm going to choose something that I really get an experience from. And so I learned to really treat my calories with more thought and to get away from mindless eating. So those are some very helpful tips I hope that you can take forward, because within the first 3 months, I think there was a lot there. And I think you can probably utilize a lot of it yourself. Um, I want to tell you also some of the future changes here within the first 3 months. And it's really honestly hard to change much. I got to be completely transparent. I was talking to AJ about it on the podcast we had. He's like, "Well, you did pretty well, right?" Like I got a few first places. I'll say it, the way I look at it is I got two competitive first places and a third place competitively, because one was a walkover. But 30 pounds in 3 months is a very successful cut, and it didn't feel that hard. The only concern I have, and the criticism comes within the lean mass versus fat mass that was lost. So when I look at the ratios on the DEXA scan, it looks like there was more fat mass and lean mass. And I think it's around, it was like 6.5 pounds fat mass versus 3.4 lean mass. Is 55% fat mass after the 5 week cut. So this is kind of hard. So let me explain this. The first 3 months, I didn't do a DEXA scan here, but the first 3 months went really well. Now, how much muscle mass was lost in the first three versus the last hard cut? Because that's what I'm pointing out. Like those, that 55% fat mass and 45% lean mass was after a 5 week hard cut. Willing to bet a lot of it came from there. Like lean mass started to really dissipate in that last month. So it's hard to really blame much in the first 3 months. The only thing that the iterations that I would consider doing was a movement, probably keep to 14K at the start, maybe 15K by the second month, maybe. Strength, and I actually might even start cardio sooner. Again, I would have to see how the fat loss goes. It was super successful at the start, so it's really hard to be critical. But I probably would keep it to just stepping outside as much as I can. It was just super efficient, not just efficient. It was just easy, right? It was easy to recover. It was easy to upkeep. I enjoyed it, right? I would even include it within I would be training people in boxing, and so I'm training a boxing class. And I'm the coach. I was like, I got my step count up. I'm walking around every single person. I'm like, okay, do this. I walk over there. I do this. Walk there. I'm like, how many steps I got? Okay, keep walking, keep moving, keep yelling and motivating. I was like a better coach from it, instead of just standing there and chilling at the side. Like I wanted to move, and it worked great. So the movement, the step count, I can't reiterate enough how well that went. Strength, more volume of effective reps, as I mentioned, but cautious with the reps in reserve. So I want more volume, using more of that rest pause technique to do the efficient workouts and to maintain volume. So I want to maintain a higher volume. I want to do more of that in the next cut. But again, it's hard to say. The biggest thing is how much more lean mass can I actually sustain in there. And nutrition, maybe a slightly higher start, around 2,200 calories, bringing it down each month or every few weeks possibly could help losing less lean mass. And it has to experiment. Like I talked to a lot of people who start actually at higher, but they cut harder. So they start higher at their calories, and then at the end they're cutting harder. They're doing high intensity stuff harder and all that stuff. But they're also eating. Like I remember, if you go back to one of the conversation I had with Chris Watson, he was eating more calories than me going into the show, and he's like a weight class below me, but he's working way harder during his cardio. So really hard to say which approach is better, right? So I'm going to play around with it. I'm not doing a show next year, but I'll play around with something similar. But it's hard to say whether or not it'll make a difference. So the only other thing was 4 meals a day, probably sooner in the prep. That, again, depends on lifestyle. If I work out in the morning, I'm not going to have breakfast. If I don't work in the morning, I don't worry about breakfast. That's kind of how I go about it. So depends on how my whole training split goes. So considerations for you, I want you to take this stuff as I keep making the jumps that I want you to learn from. Movement is so simple. You don't have to do cardio. Just try to do 10 to 12K steps a day and outdoor walking as much as you can. You keep that step count up, you're going to be moving metabolically healthy, and it is way more sustainable than doing cardio. You're just going to enjoy it more. And if you can make it with a partner, you can, make it a part of your day where you're just like, hey, can I do a walking break at work, at lunch? Make it a part of your routine. Make sure your body is balanced in your strength training. So lower upper, I tend to see like people don't balance that out. I always talk about squat, hinge, push, pull. Make sure you got something quad dominant, posterior chain dominant, and push pulls. Like make sure you have, if anything, more pulls and pushes. And then for your strength, 3 to 4 days a week is still plenty. So if you're like, oh man, he's doing 5 days a week, I only got 3. You're literally, if you're in a fat loss goal, okay, if we're talking fat loss here, you're trying to sustain your muscle, your function, and it's just being on you. If you see people who lose body fat and then they just look like a small version and they have a lot of loose skin, I don't think we fully understand how some people have it, some people don't. But commonly, people will not do enough strength training and they will lose that muscle mass that actually was underneath that fat because they don't actually do enough. And so if you want to sustain, because a lot of people have muscle underneath their fat and they don't know it. So you need to sustain it. You can do that in 3 days a week, 3 to 4. One of my clients, Chris, who recently just had the best transformation, he won the competition 3 days a week. That's all he did. 3 days a week strength, one conditioning day, walks in between. So keep it simple. And then aim for effective reps. Remember that if you're doing hard sets, you should have effective reps. And that means that hard to move the weight fast. You always want to be able to not risk injury and do the form well. Aim for those effective reps. Track it each week, weights and reps, but have reps in reserve. It's okay to have 1 or 2 reps in reserve. Ask yourself, could I have done 1 or 2? That's okay. And even if like one set and then you do a few last reps, and you're like, oh, I only had 1 or 2, that's still okay. Okay, so that's why you track it. Nutrition, you can't just take 2,000 calories to run. Can't guarantee that's your number. This is a very rough assessment. Okay, is the body weight times 10. Okay, so if you're 190 pounds times 10, 1,900 calories. Now I weighed 216 pounds and I ate 2,000 calories because I knew where my BMR was. I knew what I was used to. AJ even said, he's like, you knew your number, you knew it can work. I just trusted you. And it worked. And because I had done the mini cut in October. So I made sure that it was something that was sustainable. And when you do it, you still got to test to know that it works. So with my clients, I always call it a metabolic test. Like, okay, we're going to base the information you gave me, your body weight and size, your age, gender. Okay, let's put this into some calculations. And there's a bit more. It's not that crazy of a formula. It's slightly different, but it's usually pretty close to that number. And then we give them their calories, try for 2 weeks. Do we see the weight go down? Do we see it stay the same? How consistent are you on it? But you need a 2 weeks if you eat knowing you're eating the same calories and doing very similar output. Then you know whether or not that's your calories. And you know whether or not you can enjoy those calories, whether your meal plans set up consistently. You need consistency for anything to be valid, right? So you test it and you're like, hey, maybe I could eat 100 calories more, or maybe I need to eat a little less. If you're feeling like really ravenously hungry after 3 or 4 days of it, increase your calories 100 or 200 calories. It's not going to be super detrimental. If you're feeling like you didn't really get much weight loss, knock it down 100, right? And you can still sustain it because you should still be appropriately satisfied, as I mentioned. Finish day where you're like, I could eat, but I'm not starving, and you have good energy throughout the day. Set up your meal plans based on the time of day. So I mentioned, have your morning meal, 1 or 2 versions of it, afternoon, evening, whatever you kind of want. And then, make sure you enjoy it. I keep reiterating that. I highly recommend that you work on meal prep. Prepare. Start with a plan. Meal plan first. Yeah, I always say you plan first. As the first step to good nutrition, plan, right? It's not just eating well. It's literally planning on eating. It's like training. First step of training is plan on it, right? Put in your calendar, meal prep and your strength training. And then from there, you get to work off that plan. Okay, next Sunday, plan it again. What iterations do I need to make? Cut out like a half hour each week just to write out your food schedule. And it makes such a difference. Eventually, you can do it more intuitively. I can do it intuitively. I know how much meat I have. I know when I got to take out more meat for another day, and I can start to fit on my calendar. But that takes a lot of skill. And I even still mess that up. So plan it, write down, take time. Don't wait for shit to spontaneously happen with your diet, right? Treat meals. I really recommend that you do them, but do your best to track them and try to keep them within 10 to 20% of your daily calories of that day. And again, just reach out for the how to have a treat meal guide, and you can have it. The more structured the rest of your meals are, the more freedom you can actually have within treat meals. And I call them treats on purpose. I didn't actually orient this enough. I don't want you to think it's a cheat. I don't like that language. I think it's super important when you talk about language with yourself around food, because our subconscious mind takes things very literal. If you say, "Oh, I'm a binger," or I'm fat," or "I'm, weak," or "I'm, suck at this," like you're really literally making your body believe it. But if you say even the word cheating, you feel like you're not supposed to do it, it's like, I actually think you should do it. It's just a treat. It's a treat. It's fun food. It's for entertainment. Like, are you a cheater if you watch TV? Well, TV is not the most productive thing for us to do, but it's relaxing. We enjoy it. So we don't call that. We call that entertainment. This is food entertainment, right? So I call it a treat. Track your treats. Keep it within 10 to 20% of your calories. Eat it mindfully and try to eat it with someone as often as you can. Mindset tips. These ones are very helpful for you. Okay. Patience. Patience isn't waiting. It's how you behave while you're waiting. I didn't come up with that quote, but I heard it. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. If you're waiting and you have a problem with waiting, and you're not being patient, right? So you really got to consider like what patience takes, and consider longer is longer than you think it is. All right. So you need to be consistent AF. You need a lot of time on this. And over time, you're going to see this success. Even myself, looking at my clients, I'm like so excited to see because they're doing well. And then after that 3 months transformation, I saw these clients. I'm like, wow, this was worth just me being patient with them. And, nothing goes slower than impatient time. You're actually going to make this harder on yourself the more impatient you get with it. Okay. Seek enjoyment. I talked about this so much. Enjoy your meals, enjoying the process, like make sure that those foods are foods that you're looking forward to. And if you don't, start working on, there's so many recipes out there. Okay. Like Instagram, they're loaded with new recipes that are simple, fun, and really delicious. So that's a little bit of work on your end, but there's going to be always work with this when you're learning a skill. That's just what it is. So enjoy your meals, try new meal types. And do you enjoy your workouts? Are your workouts something you look forward to? Can you fit them in efficiently? Are you excited to go towards this new PR in dumbbell bench press or in your Bulgarian split squats, whatever it is? Have something that you're like, I want to get an experience getting better at this. It's just so much more substantial effective for adherence, being consistent on your training. Finding hobbies and activities is another big one that make you productive to this lifestyle. So having a sport, I always say your sport can be your high intensity interval training. I mean, if we're talking golf, we're more talking about activity, but soccer, hockey, these are sprints, right? That's your hit day. Like your cardio is taken care of. So that's great. And then just ask yourself, are you acting as the best version of yourself? And are you embracing that? And this is the biggest lesson I learned way long ago, was when I finally reflected on, I honestly miss being in my prep, because in the prep, I had structure and discipline and a mission. And I just learned to embrace that. Like, this is the best version of me. This is who I want to be even without the prep. And I try to utilize the same tactics and strategies, but you have a higher source of accountability in it. But I really embrace that, because then I am willing to be like, okay, well, what's the next challenge? What's the next mountain? Because when you are climbing that mountain, that's when you're actually your best self, right? And if you can sit into that when you're present in it, it's not, I'm going to go into the quote, I have to right now. It's not trying to achieve that getting to the top of the mountain that matters. It is literally being so, empowered that you're a mountain climber, that you're driving towards this, and you're embracing the struggle. And you're like, yeah, this sucks, with a smile on your face. Yeah, this is tough. I can handle this. And that is not trying to pursue happiness. That is the happiness within pursuit. And that's what's going to make you, just as a person, cognitively, so much more dangerous in the world, right? So I just really embrace and sit into your journey as that is The struggle is the benefit, right? And yes, it's going to be a struggle. Yes, it's going to be challenging. But if you use these tactics, as long as you get your structure down, it is nowhere near as challenging as you think. It's just practice, right? Own the lifestyle. Okay. This is another really good one. Another personal quote of my own is, you aren't faking it till you make it. Because if you fake it, as I mentioned, not enjoying these things, not enjoying your meals, you're white knuckling it, you're not enjoying your training, but you're like, I'm just going to do this for 3 months and I'm just going to get there. And then you just give it all up. You're faking it, right? Because you can't just borrow a lifestyle, because you'll borrow a physique. The lifestyle gives you a physique. You want to keep the physique, you keep the lifestyle. So I say, you're not faking until you make it. You're going to practice it till you become it. And it's just your norm. And that's something that I really always try to sit into. When I did my prep, everything I was trying to do, except for the last 5 weeks, was something I would sustain. And I kept doing, and I do a lot of the same stuff still. So own that lifestyle as much as you can. Okay, so that is it for the initial phase 1 to 3 when it comes to nutrition, training, and the mindset stuff that I wanted to really be able to teach you, because I think that that's the stuff that you can take practically yourself and move forward with. I am going to describe all of the other stuff as far as more posing and how I did the final cut, which is a really hard cut, but this is much more sport specific to the bodybuilding. And I want to completely separate it, not just because of the length of the podcast, as there's quite a bit of information here already, but because you should identify those as being completely different things. But it was also really cool from my experience to realize, actually, you can do a great deal of this in a very healthy way. And a lot of people can learn from this. And so I was so glad that I went through this, honestly, for the first 3 months, more than anything. It was terrific to have the result that I did, to win the medals I did as a competitor. It was awesome. But I was, even from so many years of trying to lose body fat and doing cuts over the years, that I was so happy to go through a transformation that was so healthy and so well thought out, that I can actually help teach other individuals to do the same. And so I hope you learned a lot from this episode. I hope that there was many things that you can utilize yourself. You may have been following my story and heard a lot of this already, so that's okay. Some of this was for new people who hadn't heard it as well, but I also kind of wanted to condense it and to give my own self-reflection on this. I had to even go through some of my notes to some of the things and the phases that I did. And there was probably even more details in there, some supplements I had added along the way. I think I'll talk about more in the next phase. But for the most part, I think there's a lot here that you can take from. And if you know anyone who is curious about what's a really good, healthy way to lose body fat, like, there was a good guide here. Remember that there's individualities that I gave you, which was my workout split, very individualized. My food choices, the calories are individualized. It doesn't mean that you can just take a 2,000 calorie and run with it. You have to make sure it fits you. And not everyone can do 14K steps a day and get the same results. It's not a guarantee at all. But the overarching theme there, I think, being a calorie deficit, strength train 3 to 4 days a week, 3 to 5 if you can, and make sure that you're getting your 10K steps a day, even, right? That can work so well. It works so well, and it works for all my clients. So I highly recommend you check it. You try that out yourself. And as I mentioned, if you want the treat food guide, just reach out, ask me for the treat food guide, and I can send that to you. But more importantly, I just really appreciate you as a listener, as a follower, a viewer. So thank you so much for checking out the episode today. We will be doing a part 2 on this, as I mentioned, that I want to really break down more of the bodybuilding specific stuff. I'll talk more about the posing, the challenges with posing. I'll talk more about really breaking down the week to week and the hard cut and the hard stuff, and also giving you my review on it. There is also a practical application for everyone to know about the reverse dieting, because the reverse dieting I'm still currently going through right now. And there is important lessons and changes that I would make to that model in future shows, in my next reverse diet. And I'm still trying to do some adjustments to it. But everyone should have a concept of a reverse diet if they ever do a fat loss. But I've redefined how to do that a lot. So there's going to be a lot more to learn in the next episode, in the part 2 of this podcast. So thanks again for following and checking out my story and following through with this. Remember, I love to work with people. Fat loss is what I do. And so if you're curious about the customization of your own program, reach out to me because this is what I do. This is how I love to help and support people. I hope this episode helped you with that support. I hope this puts you in that mindset of, yeah, I really want to get into that discipline. I want to get into that discipline zone and try my own transformation. So I hope to help you with it. So don't hesitate to reach out and ask for any guidance. I can give you a free guide on some stuff, or I can actually coach you one-on-one. And I'd be happy to support you with that. But either way, just remember what you're trying to do with this. Once you get in that mindset that you are a mountain climber, you are an ambitious person, you want to go after the thing that you're passionate about, you got to believe that that's just what you do. You're not trying to get there. You're a person that goes places. Something different about that. And when you can embrace that identity, embrace it, that's the lifestyle, that's when things really change, because that's when you just become enthralled and, inspired and empowered to take on the challenge, because you're a person who takes on challenges, because you're not just trying to achieve that happiness down the road. No, my friend, because it's not about the pursuit of happiness. It's the happiness within your pursuit. And I will catch you next time.